Now, Nigeria's Vice President Kashim Shettima has kicked off engagements in working visits to Sweden with a business forum at the epicenter in Stockholm. Now, during the forum, Swedish companies announced plans for multi-million-dollar investments in Nigeria's technology sector, while Shettima highlighted Nigeria's economic reforms aimed at improving the investment climate, boosting economic growth and competitiveness.
So I believe Nigeria is where the action is. We have the talent. We have a very young, resilient, and resourceful population in Nigeria. And with the renewed hope agenda of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, this is the best time to come and invest in Nigeria.
And what we've done, as Tay said, is we've given out over $100 million in loans, and we're pushing for a lot of impact. And we're also working with the government and the presidency to train people in digital skills. So it's not just about dispersing loans, it's not just about trying to grow portfolios, it's really also about giving back. And so we have a plan to train 30,000 people in Nigeria in technology skills this year. We started in Jigawa, where we've kicked off training for 1,000 people already, and we're going to go through the entire north training people on digital skills.
Meanwhile, Nigeria's Minister of Communications and Digital Economy, Bosun Tijani, met with Hans Odderlin, the co-founder of Swedish company Norskin, a venture capital firm that recently launched a $205 million tech fund for Africa. At the Norskin House in Stockholm, which is also an anchor investor in Norskin 22, they discussed foreign direct investment and how the company is partnering with global investors to help drive capital into the technology sector in Africa, particularly Nigeria. Joining me now to discuss this further is General Partner at Norskin 22, Lexi Novitske. Lexi, good morning to you. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're most welcome. All right, let's begin with, the Vice President's visit to Sweden along with a ministerial delegation, which includes an engagement with Norskin. What should we expect of this engagement?
Yeah, look, Norskin 22, we have a $205 million fund investing in African technology companies, and 40% of our portfolio is actually expected to be dedicated to companies coming out of Nigeria. So this engagement was really to help drive a little bit more visibility with Nigerian government and regulators to help those companies grow, but also to really hit home that foreign direct investment is hugely important to drive the technology sector in Nigeria, and that we're bringing that capital into the ground here to help promote technology and the employment that comes from that.
So technology is the key focus. Are you agnostic in other parts pretty
Absolutely.
much?
So we invest just in the technology space, mostly fintech, market enablement sectors, health tech, and edutech.
All right. So what sets this investment fund apart from others? What are you doing differently, or what do you expect to do differently?
Yeah, I mean, look, a big part of our value add as a fund is not only having team members on the ground in these markets in Nigeria, Nairobi, and South Africa, but we're also backed by over 30 founders of billion-dollar-plus tech companies themselves. Some of those founders, by the way, are African, including GB at Flutterwave, but we have primarily Nordic founders, so the founders of companies like Skype, Delivery Hero, some of these big companies that have built companies from scratch all the way and scaled them across markets to billion-dollar-plus tech companies. And these founders, look, they're looking to make an impact with their investment, but they're also looking for opportunities to expand their own companies and hopefully acquire companies on the African continent. So it's a little bit strategic for them, but for us, we can also leverage off of their knowledge on how they've built big tech companies. And they've gone through a lot of the same problems that our own founders have. So that's really hugely important for our fund.
Well, undoubtedly, these are heavyweights, pretty much. And strategy is not such a bad thing, as long as it's also beneficial to the areas that it's spilling into.
Yeah.
But let's talk about VC activity across the continent. Especially, I want to look specifically at the years 2022 and 2023. We saw activity dwindle quite a bit there. What factors probably played a role in that regard? And do we expect to see a surge in upcoming years?
Yeah. Look, I mean, this is both a positive and a negative aspect of tech industry being really global. Look, you can be building a tech company from anywhere in the world and have the opportunity to expand into the rest of the market. Your customers can be in the US, sitting from Nigeria, but that also means in terms of investment capital and even valuation, you're going to be affected by what's happening in the global tech ecosystem. So what we saw is US led this, interest rates dropped, interest rates increased, that really led to a reduction in value of listed tech companies, and then that trickled down into the private sector. And we eventually saw that trickle down to Africa as well. But what we're seeing that come back. So a lot of interest in US tech is starting to increase. Valuations are starting to drive a lot of that growth as well. And at the same time, we're seeing international investors want to invest with trusted local partners like us to start getting involved in the African continent again, because that's where they're really seeing the untapped growth. So some of their portfolio companies are looking for strategic acquisitions. Venture companies are looking for companies that are seeing attractive unit economics. And frankly, we're seeing some of those come out of our portfolio better than some of the markets in Silicon Valley or even in Stockholm itself.
Right, so we expect in the next few years, possibly, we would be singing a different tune, isn't it?
I definitely think so. I mean, look, for us as investors, it's kind of two sides of the same coin. Like, we're excited to see international investors come back. We think that'll drive a lot of the growth of capital, of course. But I think we'll also see valuations come back quite a bit, and that's something that we're cognizant of. But it also means that we're being quite aggressive on doing investments now to kind of counteract some of that increase in valuations.
Oh, that's very important. Well, Lexi, I mean, you've been in this space for quite a bit, so you understand, you know your onions. When it comes to investment, what exactly do VCs look out for? What makes a startup attractive to you?
Yeah, look, I think it's more of an art than a science, but things that we certainly look for are a huge market size. So I think that's why international VCs are also so interested in Nigeria, because Nigeria itself can actually be a single market success story for a lot of these companies because the consumer market size is really there. We're also looking for lean, scalable models. So fintech is a great example of this, something that can be built off of software alone, doesn't have a large need for hard capital. But also, frankly, as local investors, we're also looking for things that are protected from currency devaluations and big fluctuations in economic changes. A lot of our portfolio, you'll see, has a huge US dollar component, but that's also because they're helping companies, for example, in Nigeria export to the global market and generating that US dollar revenue for the companies here based on the ground. But we're also looking for the team. I mean, the team has to be very experienced operators. We like to see a team that is focused very proactively on keeping operating costs low and keeping unit economics really high. So being able to generate consumer growth and high revenue from those users without spending a lot of money to target those users.
Oh, those are very key points. You're not asking for too much, many would say, right? Just targeted on that. But in terms of growth potential, what do you see when we look at Nigeria's tech ecosystem in relation to, say, other parts of Africa? What do you see in terms of potential?
So I have been in Nigeria now for about 13 years, and what I've always seen, and I think this is even more the case now, is a great market size, like I mentioned, but also an incredible pool of talent that is not only very entrepreneurial, but in a lot of cases has been self-trained and has those technical operating skills. We're also looking at Nigeria really as a base for companies to be built, but then expand to the rest of Africa and probably other markets in the world. I mean, I think the saying that if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere, I think it's especially true for Nigeria. If you can make it in Nigeria, you're going to dominate in other markets as well, because you've really built up that resilience and that know-how in tough markets.
Yeah, it really is a tough resilience training ground, isn't it? We don't have a lot of time left, but we can't talk about successes without looking at the challenges. What are some of the key challenges that, the tech ecosystem actually faces here, apart from funding? Funding is the one that jumps out.
Yeah. So I think that the number one thing that a lot of tech companies have had to deal with is the devaluation in the naira relative to the dollar. The tech companies here are structured in the US, they're being valued on a US dollar basis, and even if they're seeing a lot of growth in the underlying consumer base, the revenue is inherently on a dollar basis going down. So companies are getting judged for that very, very hardly. But I think also the economic headwinds that the rest of the market has been up against is also affect these companies. Their consumers are able to spend less, they're able to save less, and that's generated a lot of hardship for a lot of tech companies that are focused on that Nigerian consumer as their user base.
So sometimes unforeseen circumstances also play a role in this.
Definitely.
You're spot on that. Lexi, I want to thank you so much. We've come to the end of this. I've been chatting with General Partner at Norskin 22, Lexi Novitske. We'll see you again very soon.
Thank you so much.
Many thanks.